Hello, welcome to the Rooms with Ronald podcast, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. In 2023, I set an intention to shop 100 apartment communities to see how leasing was evolving around the country. Rooms with Ronald was born out of that experience. In this series, I share my experiences and engage in meaningful conversations with other professionals in the industry as we discuss all things related to leasing and marketing. Join in as we expand the Rooms with Ronald experiment. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Rooms with Ronald, a podcast on all things leasing and marketing. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington, and I am so excited for today's guest. Today's guest is a mastermind of data and information. I like to, think of her as this queen of data who is this legend. I am joined by Carla Alicea, who is the Director of Research and Performance at SatisFacts Apartment Ratings. Carla, thank you so much for joining me.
Oh my gosh, thanks for inviting me to have this conversation. I think it's very timely, and I've always wanted to be on your podcast because I just love your energy and what you bring to our industry. So thank you.
I remember when I had Leah on, you said, I was a little jealous. She said she was coming on. And so I thought when I was thinking about all these review things that are coming out today, I was like, I have to get Carla on this episode because she is going to know all things. And I also feel like you've kind of been on the review tour lately, right? Educating the industry about, all these changes. And I was like, well, I don't want to be left out and I don't want my listeners to be left out. So let's bring Carla on. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this, especially on such a short notice.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's get it done. I mean, it's very timely. The rules just went into effect this week. And so I think it's really important that we start talking about them a little bit more, right? And for our audience, what we're talking about are the new FTC trade rules around review and testimonial solicitation, which actually aren't new, Ronald. These rules have been published for some time. They've been published as guidelines. Right. So it's the FTC guidelines for the use of reviews and testimonials in marketing and advertising. However, over time, as marketers started to embrace reputation management and reviews, I think for many different reasons, right? As a marketer, we're really interested in search engine optimization, making sure that our listings get bumped up in the algorithms. We know that reviews are a big part of that, right? We also know that reviews influence our prospects, whether or not they contact our community, whether or not they tour the community, what they read online from reviews. It's a very trustworthy source by consumers. So we want to put our best face forward. Unfortunately, though, reviews have become a numbers game and have come a little bit out of line with that actual consumer experience. And so renters and consumers in general, this is not just multifamily. This is any business that, has a brick and mortar location or is an e-commerce location that solicits reviews, whether it's on their own websites or on websites, third-party websites, Google, Amazon. For us, that would be our apartment ratings, our apartments.com. These reviews are not necessarily as authentic as the consumer wants them to be, right? And so the FTC had started getting that feedback from consumers and said, we need more enforcement power, right? We put out these guidelines, but we don't really have the enforcement power to hold businesses accountable when there's a disparity between how they're managing their reputation and the actual consumer experience. And so what went into effect this week is now the FTC has the ability to enforce these rules with fines up to $51,744. I don't know why it's such a specific number, but per incident. And they can adjust that for inflation. So you can see that if you are a business that is in the practice of paying for fake reviews and you've bought, hundreds of fake reviews over the years, moving forward, each one of those could potentially be a $51,000 fine. So it could get out of control really, really quickly.
So yes, these guidelines, rules have been around for a long time, but a lot of people may not know about them, right? Like, especially our on-site teams, right? And I think a lot of times our marketing teams at a corporate level spend so much time coming down to the on-site team saying, you have to have your Google reviews up. You have to be at a 4.0. You have to be at all these different things, right? Because we want to be bumped up. So let's just refresh what the guidelines are. What are some of the guidelines that we need to be mindful as an on-site team?
Okay. So I'm going to look at my notes over here because I want to make sure I get this right. So the rules consist of prohibiting advertisers from using fake reviews or testimonials. Okay, so what does that mean? That just means someone writes something fake. They're not a real customer. Maybe it's AI writing fake reviews. You're using a fake profile and it's just not real, right? It's not a real review. So that is a prohibited action. Prohibited advertisers from reusing and repurposing reviews. And the way that the language is written is reusing or repurposing consumer reviews for a substantially different product, right? In our industry, you can think of that as resident writes a great review for property A, and someone takes that review and posts it to property B, property C, and property D. That would be prohibited now.
And I would also think it would maybe also apply to, a management company takes resident talking about the property itself and advertising it as the management company, right? Because
correct.
So I instantly went there, but I do want to go back real quick on this fake reviews, right? So I'm an on-site team member and I used to be on-site, feels like a million years ago, right? And I'm sure you guys had to do the same thing early on do you remember when you had to get your family members to write reviews that never use the product, right? So is that going to constitute as a fake review because they never lived there, they've never interacted with, they just know you?
Yep. That's a fake review. And actually that can also be considered in the other guideline of making sure that you are properly disclosing any material connection. So that's another guideline. Letting employees write reviews without proper disclosures. That would be the prohibited action, right? So that's not just employees, it's employees, friends of employees, relatives of employees. If you've asked them to write a review and they are not disclosing that I am related to or I work at, right? But at the same time, if they're not a customer, that's kind of like a double whammy, right? They're not disclosing their relationship and they're not a real customer. They're not a prospect. They're not a resident.
Yeah, I think I don't think that part is as relevant as it used to be early on, but there still companies that are, we got to get our reviews up, especially what I always find this is when a property goes through a rebrand, right? And so they go through the rebrand, they change the name, the websites, now the Google map is updated to the new name. It's all of those things, right? So you're starting from scratch and you're trying to get through there. So I was that's the first thing I thought of when I was reading through some of them, right? And like I said, I'm not an expert on it, and I still get confused on, okay, what's constituting as, this rule. And so I thought, let's break it down. So that really does help me understand, we can't go and just write all these reviews and have interaction and without disclosing it.
Yeah. And I think what we have to keep in mind is we need to think about velocity. We need to think about authenticity, and we need to align our online reputation with the lived experiences of our residents. And here's where the risk comes in, right? Because let's say we're still incentivizing our employees for 4 and 5 star reviews. I do not think that is a practice that we should be continuing, because what I have seen in my research is that by incentivizing employees for these 4 and 5 star reviews, we're creating a pressured environment. And it's hard to constantly get those new reviews over and over, week after week, month after month. Let's say you're only a 100-unit community. right? There are only so many opportunities every month, every week to ask someone new. And we know from our research, the best time to ask for a review is when we've gone above and beyond to meet, a resident's expectations, or when we've turned a negative into a positive. These are the two times that the majority of renters are more likely to write a review when asked, right? So how often do we get that opportunity to go above and beyond? How often do we get that opportunity to turn a negative into a really great positive? The more opportunities we have, the more opportunities we can say, hey, would you mind writing us a review about this experience, to share that story about our community? So if we're just pressure cooking our teams, right? We need the reviews, we need the positive reviews. That pressure manifests in a misalignment, because now I feel like I need to get these reviews or I'm not doing a good job. So I may be more likely to ask my mom and dad, my friends and family, go in a chat group. We see this all the time, chat groups where multifamily operators say, I'll write a review for you if you write a review for me. It's getting towards the end of the quarter. Let's get our review quota up. These chat groups, number one, are putting our companies at risk.
Yeah.
Especially now that these enforcement capabilities have been granted to the FTC. A district attorney wants to make a name for themselves. They want to bring a suit to a regional portfolio group. They see this chat group, they do an investigation, and bam, that's all it takes. So
I feel like right now too, though, like with all eyes on multifamily, right? I mean, with all the lawsuits and housing affordability, all these things that are making headlines, like I feel like this is going to really come down to multifamily, right? They're probably not going to go maybe so much after Amazon, like the Amazon reviews are like that. Like, I feel like this is where they're going to start the enforcement at, because it's in the news and there are people out there who are going to want to make a name for themselves, as they're looking to advance their career in like the district attorney, things like that. So this enforcement of this $51,000, does it go to the property, or is it, I'm an employee, I'm a leasing agent, we do the investigation, they come in and say, Ronald has all these fake reviews. Can I personally be fined for that, or does it go to the property or the company?
So first of all, I just want to put out there, I am not a lawyer, but we did actually host a webinar recently with a lawyer who answered this question. And if I recall correctly, what he said is that the responsibility of the fine is with the company. And what the company has to show is that they have made a concerted effort to have the right policies in place, the right reputation management practices in place, and the right training and accountability in place, so that they're holding their employees accountable. What we can't do as a management company, right, is put this pressure on our teams to produce all these 4-star reviews while at the same time saying, this is what our policy says that you should and shouldn't do, but we're going to turn a blind eye as your 100-unit community got 54-star reviews in 1 month. The math doesn't work out there. So it becomes more important that at a corporate level, we align our operational policies, our operational goals, again, with that reality, with that real on the ground resident experience. Now, the best way to do that is to have your internal feedback tools. Those are your surveys, your resident surveys. And if your resident surveys are telling you that your residents are having a 3-star experience or 4-star experience, then you can expect to have an online experience that's congruent. Maybe a little less, maybe a little more, depending on your operations. But when there is a huge disparity, a larger and larger gap between that internal feedback that you're getting and what you're portraying online, there's the potential for risk. And that risk then will look at the management company and say, well, what are your practices? How are you holding employees responsible? Are you training your employees that they need to disclose if they're writing their own reviews, their connection, that they can't promote fake reviews? And so all of that would be taken into consideration.
When I worked in hotels, I did events, and we had to ask for reviews, right? That's what we did back then. We were not allowed to say, "Will you leave me a positive review?" Like that, we had to say, "Do you mind leaving us a review?" We strive for fives, whatever your honest opinion is. And I feel like we don't do that very well in multifamily, right? It's always, "Do you mind leaving me a positive review?" And I'm like, my skin just shrivels up. I'm like, you can't say positive review. Like, you have to say, "Can you just leave me a review of your honest feedback?"
Yeah. And here's the thing. Let's just take the whole FTC conversation out of the perception for the moment. Let's think about it from a prospect's point of view. Prospects, I think 63% of renters said on the recent online renter study that they are suspicious, that they don't trust a community's ratings and reviews if most or all of them are positive, right? And in our qualitative research, when we ask renters about the balance between negative and positive, they actually expect to see some negative feedback. And here's why. We're multifamily. We are the landlords. Pipes bust. This is a legal contract that you're entering in. Life happens, right? And renters know that. So when they see a reputation, let's just go back to our 100 unit community. Maybe they were just built in the last year. So they've only been in operations for 12 months and they've got 200 4.8 star reviews. There's suspicion there from the renter's perspective, right? The other thing is, what is the review saying? Are you just leaving me a 5-star rating with no detail? Or is the review saying, "Love it, everything's great"? In fact, I'm quoting a renter from one of my videos on Quest for Truth. She goes, "When I see the reviews and they say, 'Love it, everything's great,' she's like, I don't believe that. Everything's great, right?" What they're really looking for, what prospects are really looking for, is honest feedback about the experience so that when they move in, they have realistic expectations. So I always like to think of it this way, because I'm that person who, when I shop for a hotel, I look for the 4 and the 5 stars, the 4.5, the 4.6. I want that luxury experience. When I check in and there's no water in my room, I get very annoyed because I booked at a 4.5 star hotel. I expect there to be water in my room. I expect certain things. And when they're not there, I get a little frustrated and I'm the first person to pick up the phone and call that front desk. "Can someone please deliver me some water? Can someone please bring an extra blanket?" I'm that person. And so when a renter is looking for that 4.5 star experience and moves in and doesn't get it, what are they then doing? They're that high demanding resident now, putting more pressure on that on-site team to deliver on that 4.5 star experience. And so what I'm saying is that there's value in being authentic and sharing stories that are realistic. So neutral reviews, those 3-star reviews, right? Let's not think of them as bad anymore. Because in fact, we asked renters also, what's the average star rating that you would need a community to have to be able to live there? And then we did an
answer to this.
You do?
I do.
What is it?
3.82.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. It's 3.82. And what's really interesting is when we look at that distribution chart, there's actually a chunk of renters that are okay with a 2.5 to 3, little bit on a 3 to 3.5. The largest chunk of renters is a 3.5 to 4.0. And then anything above 4.0, between 4.0 and 5.0, that's only 16% of renters. Only 16% of renters expect you to have a reputation above 4.0. But yet we're all striving to have these 4.0 and above reputations, creating unrealistic expectations. And then we get surprised when our teams burn out.
Do you foresee in the future, because the whole point of getting to the 4.0 is so you populate in your SEO and the best, right? And Google and all these. Do you foresee that?
I think that is a misconception, Ronald. I have actually seen apartment communities highly ranked on Google, and they're not in the 4.0s. They're in the threes.
Well, usually it's when you search like best apartments in my area, that's what the 4.0 like should populate. That's what Google says populates into the best. So do you think, like, knowing that it's only 16% of renters, that we're going to see in the years to come that might shift and
I
especially
do.
with the FTC, like these new like review, like I think that's kind of the trickle down effect, right? What are your thoughts on that?
I actually do think, and I think Google's already started adjusting their algorithm. There's been a lot of talk about their EAT algorithm, right? EATT. And I can't remember what all the uh, uh,
What it
acronyms are
stands
for.
for?
Yeah, but one of them is trust. One of the T's is for trust. And I think what they're going to start to realize, and they're going to start using machine algorithm and machine learning and AI detection tools. There's a big hoopla in computer science right now around AI detection tools to sniff out fraud in consumer reviews. And they're getting really smarter at that. And when we see a bunch of 5-star reviews coming in all at one time, or the velocity is unnatural. You see every Monday, every Tuesday, you're getting a certain number of reviews at a certain specific time. Or they're going to start looking at the category of business. In our case, I think it's apartment complex is what they call us on Google, something
Yes.
like that. They're going to look at that.
I changed that too. I needed to say apartment communities, get rid of the word complex, please.
Right.
I write Google very often and tell them that.
But I think they're going to start looking at categories of businesses and looking at velocity. And when you have outliers in your data set, that's going to trigger an antitrust degrade in your rankings because it's not natural, right? We can identify these natural patterns. So if I had to give on-site teams any advice, I would say focus on your internal feedback metrics. Use your internal feedback metrics to improve your service delivery, to improve your resident satisfaction and sentiment. And then naturally, as you have those opportunities to ask for stories, right? Encourage those stories to be posted, because what we know consumers value is we know they value the story in the review. We know that they highly value verified reviews. And we know that they highly value your response. Those are the 3 most helpful elements of an online review from the renter's perspective. So if you can cultivate really great stories, they don't have to be 4.0 stories. They can be a 3.2, a 3.8, a 3.9. That's fine. But those stories are going to help set realistic expectations with renters, share what's really unique and special about your community, and move the needle. And I think the biggest opportunity is in your response, because something's going to happen and you're going to get that resident who's really upset, who decides to go online and write that raving review because maybe they didn't read their lease, or we didn't explain something in a way that they understood it, right? But you know what else? Renters know that those are one-offs. When they filter for and read your negative reviews, which 70% of renters do. So the whole idea of for every negative review, I need 5 positives. No, because they're not even reading your positive reviews. 70% are filtering for and reading your negative reviews. So what they're looking for in those negative reviews are reoccurring themes. So if you're always getting negative reviews that they didn't know about the lease break fee, use that feedback to make sure that every new move-in and every resident understands what the lease break fee is. What's that policy and procedure going to be, right? So that you don't get another negative review about that again. So that
My
when
favorite thing is those residents who don't even give you the chance to fix it, right? They just go on and they start to like, it's just like, and I will say, like, you talked about your hotel experience and you're like, I don't read reviews for anything. Like, I'm that person. Like, I'm just like, if I want to do it, I'm going to do it. Like, I don't think the review is going to influence me either way. Like, I'm going to have my own experience. But I do get the like hotel surveys. How was your stay? And so recently I was staying in a city and I stayed at a Hilton property, and I got the survey. And it was so funny because I always joke with my husband. He works in hotels. I'm like, I only get the survey when there's a problem. Like, it's like my phone is listening and like I get, like they know I had a problem. And so like I remember, it's the little things. Right? I remember I checked into the hotel. The gal was like super nice, and I stay at this brand very, very often. She did not acknowledge my diamond status. I didn't give like my snack, which I never take, but it was like in that property, like I got a survey, and I used to like just used to get all tens on the survey for me because at the time, my husband's like management company that he worked for at that time, that was part of their metrics on their bonus. Your guest satisfaction survey had to be at XYZ. So I'm like, oh, that's just everywhere. I'm just going to give you 10. If there was a problem or no problem, and I was like, I'm actually doing the property a disservice. Like, I don't fill them out very much anymore just because I'm like, I just stay at so many hotels. And by the time I get it, I'm already checked in somewhere else and it's just not in my mind. So I get that. And I'm just like, I can't be that person that just gives you a 0 now because you didn't acknowledge this or I didn't give you the opportunity to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And I think, I'm that person. I'm an optimist. I truly believe that most people are reasonable. However, you will run across those random, I think, unreasonable renters. There is always one in the group. But the majority of our renters, they're very reasonable. They're just people trying to make a living, and renting has gotten harder. Everything has gotten harder. Even if you're a homeowner, insurance and taxes, things have just gotten harder because of that inflationary period we went through after the pandemic. And so everyone's just a little bit more on edge. So any feedback we can get internally from our residents to identify those opportunities for improvement is going to reflect in your online sentiment when you do ask for those great stories. And then when you get the negative, and I mean, you need to respond to all reviews, but when you get the negative, what we're finding is that your response can actually have a positive impression. So you have a negative review, maybe it's a 1-star review, residents ranting and raving, they didn't know about their lease break fee, right? As an example, the best way to reply to that review is to do it quickly, to demonstrate your commitment to customer service, to demonstrate your responsiveness, because that's what renters want to know. If I move into this community and I have a problem, how quickly is the on-site team going to respond to me? How quickly you respond to an online review sets that perception. So respond quickly. And then what we have gotten used to doing is using a template or moving the conversation offline. So thank you so much for bringing this to our attention. Please reach out to us here. That looks like a template. It didn't acknowledge any of the issues raised in the review. And remember, when you're writing that response, you're writing for 2 audiences. Yeah, you're responding to the person who wrote the review, but more importantly, you're writing that response for every prospect that's going to read that review. And knowing that 70% of them are filtering and reading the negative ones, we need to take some time to really craft that response. Demonstrate that you know your policy and procedures. Thank you so much for writing this review. We're so sorry you were unaware of the lease break fee. As outlined in our lease in section we highlight the following for the lease break fee. During your move-in, you should have initialed this section, and a leasing agent should have reviewed this with you during your key when you came to pick up your keys. If you don't feel like any of these situations apply to you, please reach out. We'd like to hear more about your circumstances, right? So now you didn't just give that resident lip service. You didn't just move it off. You demonstrated to that prospect, hey, they've got a policy and procedure in place. It's in the lease. They review it during this time, right? And you showed your responsiveness. So it's a demonstration of how professional you are, how knowledgeable you are. And it really says, hey, for the prospect, that team knows what they're doing. I know if I move in, they're going to be right on top of it.
I think it also sets for that prospect when I go to move in, I know what the expectation is, right? It sets that expectation. So I know that they should be doing this, right? And so if I get done and I'm getting my keys and that hasn't happened, now I can say, hey, I read your review. Where did we initial, I just want to make sure that because again, it's the optimist, right? Hey, that you're doing what you should be doing, so nothing comes back on you. Did we just skip over that kind of part? So I think that's great.
Okay, a couple more rules we didn't get to. So we talked about fake reviews. We talked about repurposing reviews. Did we talk about paying for positive reviews or social indicators?
We talked a little, we brushed on it.
Okay, so we can't do that anymore. We can't pay for positive reviews and we can't pay for social media indicators. That means likes, comments, shares, right? We don't want to do that. When it comes to contests, if we're running a contest, if we're giving anything away in exchange for a review, points, raffles, gift cards, anything, it must be disclosed in the review itself. It must say sponsored, promoted, incentivized review in the review. And if the person writing the review did not put that in their review, then it is your responsibility when you respond to say this review was incentivized. Okay, so very important if you're going to continue to incentivize for reviews, it needs to be, the rule is clear and conspicuous so that the consumer reading that review knows it was incentivized. Can't be hidden, can't be little tiny text that nobody can read. It needs to be clear and conspicuous. We also can no longer, and shouldn't have been in the past, suppressing honest negative feedback. If you're using any kind of system that helps to get reviews removed, let's make sure that we're not removing any honest feedback. Okay. That is a big no-no. The other thing we talked about is disclosing any personal relationships. Very important. If you say you do live at the community you work at, you can write a review. You live there, you're a customer, it's not fake, but you do have to disclose, I live and work at this community. There has to be clear disclosure. And then any inflation of social media influence, such as paying for followers or likes, is also prohibited under the new FTC rule.
I think there might be more guidance later on, right? Because you have these influencers and you're technically paying the influencer, right? So you're not paying for the like or share, but you're paying the influencer to, that might live at your community or whatever's happening that people are following. So I think as we kind of dive in the years to come, that might reshape some of our marketing tactics.
Disclosure of that relationship, right?
Yeah.
A full disclosure and a clear and conspicuous disclosure of that relationship is definitely warranted at this point. And as you said, there may be more guidelines coming.
Did we miss any other ones? Those are
the big ones. Those are the big ones. And again, I think as long as we're using our internal feedback to identify those opportunities to improve our operations, maybe we focus more of the incentives for our teams on those internal metrics and allow our online reviews to be more natural, right? Remember that only 16% of renters are looking for those 4-star reviews or higher. So let's not be scared of real positive or real neutral feedback. Let's embrace the story that we can generate. I woke up this morning and my toilet was over flooding with sewage. I called the office and by the time I got home, I had a brand new toilet, brand new linoleum, and the carpet smells super fresh and beautiful. Can't believe they got it all done while I was at work. I was expecting a mess and I didn't get it. So yeah, the toilet overflowed. But what did that story say? It said that the team got into action and fixed it right away.
Yep.
These are stories that really move the needle with renters and help them make the decision to rent, right? The decision. That's a decision signal.
I love that. Well, Carla, thanks so much for joining me. I learned a lot. I feel like it's more clear and concise on what we can and can't do on site. And, and I agree. I think we have to get away from 4 and 5 and it's honest and it's natural. And here's the problems because everyone has that. And, what do we do to fix this? So thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited that I finally got you on and we got to talk, reviews. we will definitely tag you in Apartment Ratings and SatisFacts when we post it. So if anyone has any questions, they will know where to find you. I feel like everyone knows Carla, so they will always know where to find you. So thanks to our listeners.
Big industry, I will tell you that. And change doesn't happen very quickly. So I think it's good that we keep bringing awareness to this topic and just letting our teams have the room to be real, right? It's really hard. There's a lot of pressure on all sorts of elements of our operations. Let's just ease up a little bit. Get out those real authentic stories. Now, we also did a webinar with a real lawyer. When you post online, I'll link to that. So if anyone's interested in that, it was a Q&A. He answered a lot of great questions. You can check that out as well.
Perfect. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. You have been listening to Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. We've been joined today by Carla Alicea, who is the Director of Research and Performance at SatisFacts and Apartment Ratings. Until next time, guys, happy leasing. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I left you with some fresh ideas or a new perspective. Leasing and marketing are evolving rapidly, and Rooms with Ronald is committed to offering a place to hear about those changes. We also celebrate and acknowledge the fundamentals of exceptional service that will never go out of style. So if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, or subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other exceptional industry podcasts, call pieces, and sponsorship opportunities.